Welcome to the I Stand Correct podcast. Iryna Zarutska, Bethany Magee, and now Jeanette Marken. Different women, different places, same story. In a country where citizens have the right to redress their grievances, how many innocent women have to suffer before judges stop releasing repeat offenders back onto the streets? This keeps happening, and judges keep getting a pass. Leave your comment below on what you think we should do about it. Make sure you hit like and subscribe for more content just like this. Merry Christmas from the I Stand Correct podcast. I hope that you're at home with your family on Christmas Eve. Christmas is the only holiday where we get an eve for that. I understand that Halloween is already an eve of All Saints Day, but for some reason, no one actually celebrates All Saints Day. Trying to stay positive, but I'm really mad because it has happened again. Someone else who shouldn't have been in society was out, and because of that, because of a judge not doing their job to protect society, because they have to be lenient and understanding towards criminals, we had someone on the street that ought not have been. Setting someone on fire is pretty terrible. It's a new personal best for the scum of the earth, but now there's this guy in Seattle who took a long piece of wood with a nail in the end of it. I don't know if he fashioned it or if he found it, but he turned it into like a medieval weapon and swung at full speed at a woman, hit her in the head with maximum leverage, and the screw in the end of it took out her eye. And I'm hoping that this is going to get picked up by mainstream media. When I decided to do this on the show, it was because, well, nobody's talking about it. That actually is really bad for a show like this. You want to go in directions where you're going to trend algorithmically. What are people searching for? Well, if it's not in the mainstream media, then nobody's going to be searching for it because no one's going to know about it. But conscience gets to you a little bit, and you say, well, so this is a small little channel. I have 130 subscribers. Occasionally I have a reel that will go semi-viral by my standards. And so why not talk about her? This comes from the Hungarian Conservative. This is literally coming from Hungary. There are sources now in the United States that are reporting on this, but this is the earliest source, is that a newspaper in Hungary can accurately, or at least report on what's going on in the United States. Western mainstream media have once again come under fire for remaining largely silent following a brutal attack committed by a career criminal in Seattle, United States, according to a recently released footage. I'm going to fucking butcher his name, and I don't even care. Fail by Galipia P. 42 assaulted 75-year-old Jeanette Marken with a wooden board fitted with a protruding screw, striking her in the face and gouging out her eye. Mayhem. That's what that is. A horrific crime causing severe injuries that permanently affected her eyesight. The video of the incident was recorded by Seattle Police Real-Time Crime Center. It's kind of one of those things you saw in movies back in the 90s when your whole city was wired for CCTV and you could track people all over, and the screens had cool little graphics and holograms. That's what they do in Seattle. Does absolutely nothing to prevent crime, though, but at least they do have a video of it happening. Body cam footage from first responders showed that the attacker was immediately recognized by police. The police knew this guy. He's notorious for random assaults. One officer says he's a regular. He usually punches. I guess today he decided to escalate from his usual. There's a guy in Chicago that does the same thing. They call him the loop puncher or something, but he just basically goes around punching people. P's criminal record is extensive. In 2011, he stabbed 2 people at a party at SeaTac. One of the victims was stabbed 8 times. If you stab someone 8 times, I'm even willing to be reasonable. Like, let's set the limit at 4. If you stab someone more than 4 times, you're a fucking maniac and you belong in a box for the rest of your life. No, stabbing's not that normal. No, stabbing's not that common. No, most people are not just one bad day away from a stabbing spree. I used to hear that a lot when I worked in the prison. There was a lot of moral equivocation going on, and a lot of it was so that officers didn't look down too much on the inmates. They'd say, they're not that different than you. How many of you guys here have ever driven home drunk and didn't get caught? So the difference between you as an officer and them is that you didn't get caught. Never mind that driving drunk is a misdemeanor. I mean, we're in the state penitentiary and they were all felons. No, I'm sorry. There's no moral equivocation between your common person and stabbing someone 8 times. And that was only one of his crimes. He was convicted by a jury and received an 18-month sentence of community custody. What the hell is that? I'm hoping that's a Hungarian mistranslation of jail time. But I don't put it past Seattle to have community custody being something akin to a community garden, where everyone just sort of watches out over him and makes sure he doesn't get into any trouble, or electronic monitoring or something. Who knows? Probably that. Realistically, he was released into the community on parole. He continued to accumulate assault-related charges. So he's still, after stabbing people, he's still going around and assaulting people, and including one case in 2020, 4 cases in 2023, and another in 2024. Now, before he got to 2026, he gouged out an old woman's eye. According to the King County Jail, the suspect has been booked 8 times this year. Okay, forget it. He wasn't trying to make sure he got 2025 on his list of years in which he has maimed someone. 2025 was a banger year for him. Seattle Municipal Court and King County Superior Court records indicate that none of his arrests in 2025 resulted in charges prior to the assault on Marken. What does that tell you, though? That he's been arrested, he's been booked 8 times, but he hasn't been facing charges. That shows you that there's a disconnect in the criminal justice system. We all watch Law and Order. In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by 2 separate, equally important groups: the police, who investigate crime and arrest assholes like this, and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. Which one of those groups is not holding up the deal? The police have arrested him 8 times. The prosecutors, the district attorneys, are not prosecuting the offenders because charges are not being attached to him. There's a little bit of leeway there. You could say, well, the police were not making a tight enough case for charges to be levied against this guy. However, apparently Seattle has the entire city wired for sound, and they can gather evidence like this, and he was never prosecuted. Then you could say, well, he was on community supervision at one point. I can't imagine that felonious stabbing someone 8 times didn't result in some sort of serious penal sentence. But why wasn't it even longer? Well, because the judge who decides the sentence decided he was a good guy who deserved a second chance to stab again, of course, and to gouge out a woman's eye. Seattle police have repeatedly arrested P this year on suspicion of assault, indecent exposure. So he's a whole other dimension of bad guy. He's whipping out his dick and showing it to people, probably kids. Drug-related offenses, which, we just decriminalize drugs because once those aren't crimes anymore, we'll reduce the rate of crime. That's always been the rationale for decriminalizing drugs. Well, you'll have fewer crimes as long as you stop defining things as crimes. Property destruction, unlawful use of weapons. Now he's making homemade weapons. Now he's making homemade melee weapons, and malicious mischief, which just has to be the smallest of his crimes. P is now charged with first-degree assault. Is expected to appear for a competency hearing later this month, because if he does something like this, he has to be crazy. He just has to be. I get it. Competency hearing is actually going to be fairly common. You're going to do it in most cases. Any defense attorney is worth his salt is going to say, well, this guy's nuts and he doesn't deserve to go to prison. That's his job. But every single time we get somebody who's stabbing someone to death on a train, or setting them on fire on a train, or fucking gouging out their eye on the street in front of the courthouse, our immediate response is, well, he's mentally ill. Do you not understand that it's your indulgence of these maniacs, that it's your tolerance for them that places people like Jeanette Marken in trouble in the first place? That guy should have never been there. He would not have been if not for someone's tolerance and understanding. And believe me, I understand mental illness. I have seen it in my family. I have seen it in my life. But the most severely mentally ill people I knew from prison, and despite the fact that they were severely mentally ill, they absolutely belong there. Of course, the legal test is whether or not they knew what they were doing at the time they did it was wrong. You can have a disconnect from knowing the difference between right and wrong and still perpetrate acts of immense evil. At some point, there's something called strict liability. Do you know what strict liability is? It means you did it, and whether or not you meant to do it, it's still your fucking fault, and you still need to go to prison for it because you're a danger because you might do it again. Strict liability. You rear end somebody in your car. You didn't mean to do it. You didn't have any criminal intent. It's not a crime under that description of what a crime is because you didn't have intent to do it, but you're strictly liable for the damage that you cause. And suppose you do something like that, you don't know whether it's right or wrong. What about strict liability? You go out there and stab people and gouge their eyes out. Where's the strict liability for you just being a danger of doing it again? And for anyone who says, well, if you didn't know if it was right or wrong, we ought to show a little forgiveness. Put something in your eye. How about you have empathy for the other people who don't deserve to have their eyes fucking gouged out while they're standing on the street? How about some empathy for them? Why do we have empathy and understanding to the ends of the earth for these maniacs who roam around hurting people, setting them on fire? Where are the GoFundMes for them? I don't get it. Is it because we have to assuage our conscience about them or something? We're mad at ourselves that we hate evil people? It's probably because we can't understand or we can't come to grips with the fact that we know there's evil in the world because there's proof of it everywhere. You know a man, you know a tree by its fruit, and you know a man by his work. And when you see evil works, it's an evil man. But you can't come to grips with the fact that he's evil. He has to be just like you. He has to be one bad day away from being you. So you're going to have a GoFundMe for him. P is now charged with first-degree assault. I read all that. Despite the footage spreading rapidly online, mainstream media outlets have largely refrained from reporting on the attack, which occurred on 5 December. The silence has drawn comparisons to the handling of the Iryna Zarutska murder case, which, was largely ignored until Charlie Kirk commented on it, and then he got Charlie Kirked, which the media outlets and Democratic officials were accused of coordinating efforts to not share the footage of the Ukrainian refugees' killing. When details of that case eventually emerged, it sparked nationwide outrage and contributed to Republican lawmakers successfully pushing for stricter crime legislation in North Carolina under the banner of Iryna's Law, which I think is great. You know what Iryna's Law is? It's just old-fashioned bond schedules. It's not progressive reform on how to deal with criminals. It's just, we're going to handle it the old way. And if you do something horrible, you're going to stay in jail until your court date. And then a judge can actually, a North Carolina judge, what does that even mean? They're a lay person in North Carolina. Hopefully, you would hope a competent judge who's, passed the bar. That would be a nice start. And then been a lawyer for a long time. It would be nice if they, did both sides, defense work, prosecutorial work. Really had a good head on their shoulders for how the system's supposed to work in favor of the people and in favor of individual rights. That would be nice. They could become a judge. They could look at that person's whole history, decide whether or not to have bond, and then a trial. A jury could decide everything about whether or not that person had a future on the outside world. God damn it, wouldn't that be nice? We're going to have that again in North Carolina, and we're going to call it reform. Several major media outlets, including the AP, Reuters, NBC, have faced intense criticism on social media for declining to cover the Marken case. Axe users End Wokeness, who has 3.9 million followers, published a posting which lists which outlets had reported on the incident, which had not. 0 stories from the AP, 0 from PBS, 0 from the New York Times, 0 from NPR, which is what we would expect from a government-funded propaganda rag. 0 stories from the Wall Street Journal. 0 stories from the BBC. The BBC, in fairness, in Britain, they can't criticize people of another race because it will cause a riot. 0 stories from CNN. 0 stories from the Washington Post. And I encourage you, I don't have the video here. I thought about getting it, but I want you, if you want to see this woman, she's standing out on the corner, 2 streets in front of the courthouse. A man walks up behind her with this stick, picks it up like a baseball bat, brings it up at shoulder level, and absolutely nails her right in the face with it. Knocks her down. She is 75. He is standing behind her. You know what her mistake was? Being tolerant and understanding of an obvious urban individual, an obvious dangerous individual. She's empathy. She's kindness walking around. She's trust. She embodies society's trust that I can turn my back on a man like this and not get my eye gouged out. And I'm not trying to blame Jeanette Marken. She didn't deserve this. An old woman should be able to walk wherever she wants and have absolutely nothing happen to her. An asshole like this should be offering to help her cross the street at age 75, not whacking her with a board with a nail in it. That's what a high trust society would do. That's what a decent society would do. Or a decent society would say, hey, someone who would hit a woman with a board with a nail in it needs to just be in prison because they're a danger to society. You know, prison used to be about paying your debt to society, but it also used to be you are a clear and present danger to society and you have to go away. You cannot be among us. Not in Washington. The post garnered nearly 2 million views and more than 30,000 likes in just 24 hours. Other users echoed accusations of a media blackout while also blaming progressive judges for repeatedly releasing suspects despite what they described as his aggressive behavior and clear threat to public safety. Sometimes you can predict the future. If you're someone who stabs someone 8 times, you're never going to become a good person. Is that a hot take? That if you stab someone that many times, you're never bound to ever become a good person? I'm going to sound crazy, and you can write me off for this, and it's fine. But in my mind, my crazy right-wing mind, you stab somebody 8 times, you should never be outside of prison ever again. And I don't know how you get parole after that. It's attempted murder when you stab somebody 8 times. How do you get out? But let's talk about the media blackout on it, and let's talk about how NPR is responding and PPS is responding. I wanted to share this article with you. I was looking for material on some of these things. I came across this. This is from WABE. This is a PBS outlet in Atlanta. By the way, the colors of the website are red, black, white, and green. I think there's some, as someone who's graphically minded, I think there's some symbolism there. Where else have you seen red, black, white, and green? Train stabbing spurs outcry over black on white violence, but data shows such occurrences are rare. So here we have the vigil for Iryna Zarutska in loving memory. Train stabbing spurs outcry over black on white violence, but data shows such occurrences are rare. This article aged like fine milk, didn't it? I mean, honestly, attacks like this weren't even rare before this was published, before Iryna Zarutska. But it just goes to show you how the media, particularly the left-wing media, because this is PBS, NPR, out of Atlanta, with their black, white, red, and green signaling to let you know who they support. This is them letting you know this is horrible. But, you know, statistically, it's an aberration. Statistically, this doesn't happen. Are we supposed to continue to believe that? I know it's anecdotal that I named Bethany Magee and I named Iryna Zarutska. And I'm only naming 3 people. If I wanted to do a deep dive, I've done it before on my Iryna Zarutska episode. I actually talk about how I tried to do a deep dive with ChatGPT, but ChatGPT, great tool as it is for searching the internet, won't actually assist you in anything that it thinks is agenda driven. So if you ask it, hey, how many white people have been attacked by black people? It won't tell you. It says, sorry, I can't help with anything that has a hateful premise. If you search for how many black people have been attacked by white people, it'll be like, here's a complete list. I've actually had that problem with ChatGPT a lot lately. In fact, I had a conversation with ChatGPT in which it turned itself off after trying to resolve whether or not Harvey Milk was a great human being worthy of having a ship named after him. It literally happened. Literally just it started answering me in long form and then it disappeared and it said it just violated its own policies. So you can, it's like Star Trek when Kirk talks a computer to blowing itself up. It's exactly what happened. It's tremendously satisfying. But anyway, they say, you know, such occurrences like these are rare. But I think we all know intuitively that it's not rare. And how do we know this? Well, did we do the research? Did we gather the data? I don't know about you, but I have been both a participant and an observer. I'm something of a scientist myself in the longest running social experiment ever. And that's being alive on Earth in the history of all human beings. And you can run some numbers and you can say whether or not they're statistically significant. But there's another equation you have to run when you're looking and when you're living inside the world's largest and longest running social experiment, and that's the human equation. How many people does it take for something to become a tragedy? How many people have to be injured and hurt before you do something to say no more? Does it have to, we have to allow black on white violence to become statistically significant before we have outrage about it and say this ought to stop? We have to wait for a certain number, a threshold to be reached before we have outrage about it. Otherwise, we just have to say the feelings that you have are wrong, because if you look at the numbers, it's actually not that significant. To those people who say, if you look at the numbers and they're actually not that significant, put a nail in your eye. Tell me what's significant now. Run the other equation. How does it feel to be 75 and to stand on a corner and have a maniac hit you so hard your nose is broken and your eyes lost? Okay, run those numbers for me and go ahead and get back to me. I think it's important you run both sets of numbers. I could be an intellectual. I know when a number is statistically significant. I can tell when I'm being lied to with statistics. I know that you can make almost any case for anything using numbers. That's why you have to run both sets. New York Post has since released an article about it. Elderly Seattle woman has her eye gouged out in random attack by repeat thug, and cops admit he's notorious. The cops know him. Sickening footage shows the moment an elderly woman had her eye gouged out after she was randomly bashed in the head with a board by a notorious repeat offender thug. Jeanette Marken, 75, was left permanently blind in her right eye after the alleged perpetrator. I also love how whenever you look for the video, it shows the video of this asshole picking up the board and swinging it at her face, and she gets knocked over. Allegedly. I get that we can't get sued, but it's alleged, even though we literally can see it in flagrante delicto. We can see it happening, but let's make sure that this fucking asshole who's in and out of prison, in and out of community supervision, make sure that his people can't sue us for besmirching his name. Took a woman's eye, but let's make sure we're not making ourselves vulnerable to any defamation cases from this fucking asshole, who most definitely did it, by the way, unless it's a case of mistaken identity. She was left permanently blind in her right eye. Again, Valagapina P or whatever struck her with a piece of wood. Horrifying clip from downtown Seattle captured the attacker approaching the unsuspecting woman from behind as she waited patiently to cross the street just outside the King County Courthouse. Can there be a better symbol for what has gone wrong in our society when a woman stands outside the courthouse and is struck down by someone who should have been in prison? It's just too ironic, the failure of the system. It's too tragic and it's too sad, and yet no one will take note of it. It's absolutely horrifying. Can you imagine this Christmas that this person is your mom or your mother, left without an eye because she was walking around downtown wherever she lives? And it's not just Seattle. Soon it'll be somewhere else. Someone you love, someone you care about, or you. Because no matter how many times this happens, we do not learn the lesson. We continually have absolute liability, absolute vulnerability for the people we love and care about. You know what's funny is that when I was in college, my very liberal criminal justice professor would talk about how, as a great society, a little nod there, we have a responsibility to society's most vulnerable. This is her way of like patting the floor for social justice stuff to come. It was actually very insidious at the time. It didn't recognize her for what it was. She says we need to make sure we take care of society's most vulnerable, which it was her way of saying minorities, other repressed groups for their sexuality, whatever. You know what I think is society's most vulnerable? A 75-year-old white woman who is walking downtown Seattle. That's who I think society's most vulnerable is. And we're doing absolutely nothing to protect society's most vulnerable under that definition. Because this animal should have been in a cage. And we let him out. And so something occurred to me when I was doing this, and this is where I would like to hear your comments below. What do we do about it? Because we can have reform, which means just simply going back to the old way of doing things, keeping people in jail, keeping people in prison. And I will admit that if you put a person in jail and in prison, it doesn't stop them from committing crimes. They hurt other offenders. They hurt themselves. They hurt correctional officers. I'm actually acutely aware of those things. I have seen correctional officers get hurt and killed by people in prison. But a 75-year-old grandmother is not going to get killed by some asshole who's in a men's prison. If we had just only done our job on that. But this is what occurred to me. I get so frustrated because in our founding documents, we say that citizens have the right to redress their grievances. This is what we did with England when we said, you know, we got a problem with you and we're going to tell you about it. And that's what we have in the United States. We have First Amendment rights to redress our grievances. We can talk shit about the president. We can talk shit about Congress, and we can tell them what we think about them. That's the news. That's the media. That's free speech. Ultimately, that's voting. There's a certain subset of our government that is completely removed from all redresses of grievances. We cannot tell them, seeming any effectuality, what we think of them. That's the judicial branch. We have judges, some of whom are appointed for life, some of whom are appointed for long term, some of whom run in elections, which just seems strange to us when we're voting on election day and we see some judges up for retention or for election, and you're like, I don't know. It's an apolitical ballot, so I have no idea which way I would tend to lean on this guy, and I have done no deep research to see whether or not he's soft on criminals or tough on them. So I guess here I'll fill this in. But I want to know what you think. In a case like this, where you have a repeat offender commit a grievous act, should there be something that a legislative body or an executive body can do to prompt responsibility or a response from the judicial branch? Because you know what I would like to see? I want to see the judge that let this guy out, if it's appropriate in this case, and I'm not saying you would just do this in every case, otherwise goodbye, we're never going to have any court ever again, but have a judge hauled out in front of a bunch of cameras and a bunch of journalists and have them ask some questions, and the judge needs to answer, because the judge is part of the government and the judge is ultimately accountable to the people. And we don't get to vote for judges in a lot of cases that are appointed. What's the point of having the judge march out and explain her rationale? First of all, if she's a good judge, he or she is a good judge, they'll be able to explain the legal rationale of why they did that. You would want them to have a rationalization for it, because as it stands right now, we're all pissed off at the government. We have no idea why the hell they let these people out. So tell me the reason. That's part of my anger about it, is because I don't understand it. How you could have someone who stabbed somebody 8 times and said, let him out. At least a parole hearing is something a member of the public or a victim could attend, and they can have their say. That's great. A parole hearing is great. Should this person get out? But I want to know why, when a judge sentences someone to a short term for a crime like stabbing somebody 8 times, or releases them without paying any kind of bond or anything, and they go and they eventually set somebody on fire or stab them to death, I want that judge to be held to account. At least a press conference. And you say, what were you thinking? Because I want to hear the legal rationale for it. And then I want to see that judge sit there and take some shit from somebody like me, who's completely uneducated on the law, but has some good old-fashioned outrage. And they don't have to say anything. But they need to sit there and listen, because they're my government and they're accountable to me. And maybe the next time they feel like looking at a guy like this, who stabbed someone 8 times, has an extensive criminal record, indecent exposure, and they can think about, I could let this guy out, but what will that do to society? Because I'm going to be held to account for that. If this guy goes out and stabs somebody, which I'm sure they don't give a fuck about, because they're as detached about the law and humanity as a doctor is. If somebody dies on the table, who's my next appointment, right? I'm sure that's their mentality. But maybe if they were held to account of some kind, that they had to go out there and endure just a little bit of shaming, questioning, redress of grievances, maybe they would be like, you know what? This guy's not worth ruining my day over. You have to give judges some kind of stake, even if it's a minor stake. I think it'll have a profound psychological effect if a judge has to sit in front of the people that he's supposed to protect. Judges are part of that too, and has to at least answer questions from shit-talking people like me. What the fuck were you thinking? I don't give a fuck about your law degree from Harvard. I don't care what score you got on the bar. I want to know why you thought it was great to let this asshole out. And you know what? If they're a great judge, if they're a Clarence Thomas type of whatever their ideology is, then they can endure that kind of criticism. They should be able to endure it. And if they cannot endure criticism from the public about the decisions that they make as judges, they ought not be judges. Do I sound crazy to you? All I am saying is that they have some sort of accountability where they explain the rationale why they let a dangerous criminal back out into the community, and then they take a little shit talking from somebody like me who doesn't like it. There's no redress of grievances for judges. They don't get to ever hear about what people think about them unless they have the audacity to turn on the news. But in this case, it's not being covered anywhere. So this judge probably feels fine. Judge or judges or whoever we would hold to some sort of account. I know that there's never going to be any greater accountability for judges, that we're never going to fire them because it's not fair. Judges can't see the future. We're not going to sanction them. We're not going to imprison them. We're not going to fine them. We're not going to censure them. There's not going to be any kind of like, this is bad for your career to let somebody who stabbed somebody 8 times back out on the street and then he ended up gouging out a woman's eye. We can't have that be bad for their career in any measurable sense. They're not going to get a performance review. If I did something akin to this in my job where I performed my job in such a risky fashion and there were some sort of tangible consequences to come out of it, you bet your ass I would get in trouble. And it's the same for anybody who does any job, but not judges. But I understand that we're never even going to have that. But how about a nice presser where we get to know the judge's name and the judge will tell us the rationale and they can just read through their briefs and it can be nice and polite. Is it because it would denigrate their authority as judges? We hold judges in such high regard. For some reason, we have government employees who wear robes. Does that ever strike anyone else as odd? I know I'm way out of line here. We have government employees who still wear robes, black robes, and we have to call them Your Honor. It's easier for me to have respect for authority when authority is taking care of me, when authority is keeping people like this off the streets. But when authority is allowing some asshole out there in the streets to strike down Jeanette Marken and gouge out her eye, I lose respect for that authority. I don't want to call him Your Honor. I don't want you to have this nice black robe that is so slimming for you. You're just another state employee to me, a federal employee to me. So why not some accountability? Let's take some of the mystique out of what it means to be a judge and just hold you accountable for the role that you play in the government. No more robes, no more Your Honor. Because where is the honor? Where is the esteem? If you're a judge that just lets a maniac back out on the street, a decision that when you don't have common sense, you can't be a judge anymore. That ought to be a good benchmark. I know that everyone has a different standard for what common sense is. Somehow common sense is by definition and paradoxically not all that common. But some sort of review panel ought to be triggered by, I don't know, probably the legislature saying we're going to call this person forward for some sort of, you have 30 days to appear before us and take questions from this body, from the people, or something. Do I sound crazy to you? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know what you think in the chats. Merry Christmas. Drew didn't want to do this case last night because it wasn't very cheery. And then he's railing against Karen Reed and saying how he doesn't give a fuck what people think. He knows Karen Reed did it based off of certain tangible and straightforward common sense facts. You're like, you need to spread some cheer. But unfortunately, it's a dark old world. For that reason, we need cheer more than ever. I could certainly understand that. Looks like everyone in the chats, not too many people here. It is Christmas Eve. People are with their families. But they're just talking to each other. What do you even need me for? Jody says, I'm sure there's overcrowding in prisons, but I wouldn't mind my tax dollars going to build more. Well, the thing is, your tax dollars could be spent more efficiently, Joni, and we could have more prisons, especially if needed. We can't define whether or not prisons are needed based off of tax dollars. And I am a hawk when it comes to tax dollars, because the simple fact is you need what you need based off of criminal behavior, and you can't define whether or not a prison is overcrowded. Like at our prison, we had no maximum limit. Do you know why? We were the only men's prison in the state. If someone needed to go to prison, they came here. Didn't matter if we were crowded or not, because the physical dimensions and confines of this building bear no power over a person's ability or decision-making process to commit a felony. It doesn't work that way. We can't have people in prison because there's not a prison for them. Yes, build more prisons. And I am an absolute hawk on tax dollars. I hate the way most tax dollars are spent. But we deserve the basic tenets of what we were promised: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How can you pursue happiness? How can you life, liberty, property? That's how the French put it. We changed it a little bit so that it was a little bit more zippy on the tongue. Like, how can you have a right to life when someone's out there walking around with a board, getting ready to swing it at you? Jeanette Marken doesn't get to have the same life that she had before. You think Jeanette Marken has the kind of liberty that she had before? Do you think she has peace of mind? She doesn't have that anymore. Remember, her peace of mind and her liberty was taken away. She doesn't feel safe to go anywhere. You think she's going to be wandering around in downtown Seattle again? So her liberty's been restricted by fear. And pursuing happiness, seeing out of both eyes would make her happy today. That's a gift she would love for Christmas. The general welfare, common defense, these things all preclude dangerous individuals being allowed to walk around in our society. So if government exists at all, it's for public safety, and it's not happening. We have endless number of social programs, endless number of things that make us look good every year. The police go out and do shop with the cops. Somehow there's a budget so that they can appear on social media with underprivileged kids, which absolutely no one will give a shit about the next time that they shoot someone, and it's questionable. No one's going to refer back to Facebook, but these police officers are so nice. Look at them with these underprivileged children. I'm not saying they shouldn't do anything for the underprivileged children. Maybe they should just stop taking pictures of it. We have no public safety. People are paying taxes. It's going to other things. Other things as though we could afford them. You can't afford anything as long as public safety is not happening. If people are not safe, you cannot afford anything else, because the money ought to be allocated to the idea that you're basically safe where you live. Anything else is misspent. Get the safety taken care of. Spend the money on that. And then whatever you have left over, if it ought not be returned to the taxpayer, go ahead and get yourself a little treat. People are being screwed. If you want to look at it, even if it's just, and I hate to use that phrase since she got a nail in her eye, but if you want to look at it from purely a financial standpoint, what am I spending money on when it comes to my public safety? What am I spending my money on? I think it would be funny to watch you argue with Chat GPT. I think I'm on a list now. The mainstream media lies to you, but also in instances when there's no spin that they could put on it, like, what spin do you put on this? That this nice black guy, construction accident with still innocent woman. What spin do you put on it? So you just ignore it. You hope that nobody picks it up. They hope that the traction goes nowhere. And that's why, I don't mean me. I'm not important. Let's not be grandiose. But that's why podcasts and other social media platforms on X, on Instagram, and elsewhere, places where you can find information and, frankly, opinion, are so important, because that way the mainstream media doesn't get to collude and decide amongst themselves what is important, what is not important. Because things like this, outrage over instances such as these, will change and reform policy, and it ought to be changed and it ought to be reformed. And our politicians who are running on just laughably bad platforms when it comes to crime. They ought to have to be confronted about these things as well. Uh, the mayor of Chicago, talking about how people being rounded up by ICE are all of a certain persuasion, or just generally, arrests are all happening amongst people of a certain persuasion. Well, if there's evidence for it, I guess that there's evidence to say that people of certain persuasion are responsible for a terrible amount of crimes. If the arrest statistics are backing it up, and there's evidence of those crimes enough to prosecute them and jail them, I guess you're looking at real data there, real statistics data. So maybe we're not being racist. Maybe we're just being statistics enthusiasts. Why do we need this thing stealing oxygen? I don't know. Honestly, if after you stab someone 8 times and you're an attempted murderer, it feels like at that point your days should be numbered. Don't you see it as problematic that there are towns that only exist because of a local prison? No. What you're talking about is the economy. There is a town that exists in my state that has a men's medium security prison in it. And if it were not for the employment of the people at that prison, that town probably would have gone away with the railroads. So no, prison is just another form of giving people jobs and benefits. I don't know if that's what you meant. If the prison was close to town, it would turn into a ghost town. Well, I don't agree because the time when I worked at the state prison, I was also in the city's most populated, or in the state's most populated city. And it was like an old cartoon where the witch's castle is up on a hill and everyone can like see it looming over you. So from where I lived and worked, you could see the prison and it was there and people knew it. And when you land on an airplane, you fly over the prison. You literally fly over the prison yard. So when you get here, you know that we have a prison. And on the other hand, it's like where I lived is not particularly known for crime. So maybe you have a case there. I don't know. Don't get me started on where our tax money goes. Minnesota is such a mess. Well, Joni, the money that you have spent every time you go out to eat or on your property taxes or whatever it ends up going to the state, not exactly sure how it's delineated there. I just want you to know that it has gone to funding a clan war between two or more tribes of people who have been bent on killing each other for hundreds or thousands of years. So forget having public safety, forget having nice social programs as a treat, forget having streets that don't have potholes in them, Joni. You directly funded violence in the Horn of Africa with your hard work. Let's break it down even deeper than that, because it's not so. If for some reason we're so blasé to these things, let's break down the scandal into Joni's life. Joni's alive. Joni's life is comprised of time. She spends time, sometimes at work. So that time, which is extracted as a tax from Joni's life to fund the rest of her life, that time was converted into money. That's why Joni does that. She takes some of her life and sells some of it. She sells some of the time out of her life at a job. She sells her time. Her time gets converted into money. That money, that time, is confiscated by a government which gives Joni no choice. And that life that's been converted as a subset of time and converted into cash was taken from the places where it would at least benefit Joni to some abstract degree and sent overseas, where it was used to fuel violence in another country. So Joni's life, part of what she is to walk around, speak, and breathe, was used to reduce that somewhere else in the world, thanks to Tim Waltz. We just need to fully break down what it means to actually take money away from someone and then as a in the form of taxes, and then remunerate that not only to a place where it would, in an abstract way, help Joni, but in a concrete way hurt somebody else. In a moral sense, Tim Waltz is a war criminal because he stole some of Joni's life in order to severely abate someone else's in a foreign country, or he at least enabled it. I know. I'm a big philosopher. Joni's laughing. I hope she's laughing at something else. Nothing of what I said was a joke at all. Nothing of what I said was funny to me. But I do believe in cheering you all up, and not just winding up and making you as angry as possible on Christmas Eve. So I'm going to do a couple things here. First of which is going to start with some political memes so we can gently move into the meme portion of the show. We don't have to be mad the entire time. I have to work today, so it's like what I really need is a beer, and I can't have one. Let's talk about the Crusades. Recently, from the desk of Pam Bondi, the Crusades were based. Jesus Christ is the Messiah. Praise the Lord. Bring back the Crusades. I don't know if you saw this morning in Germany, there's a Christmas market that's completely filled with people who are the Free Palestinian movements, or they're Syrians or whatever. Sorry, I don't mean to conflate them. They're just the bad guys. You have a country that traditionally Catholic, traditionally Christian, traditionally white. And they have brought those people in, and they have seen their values, such as celebrating Christmas, disappear. In fact, throughout the world, there used to be a war on Christmas, like in a secular sense, like, oh, it's about Santa Claus, or it's about jingle bells, or it's about presents. The war on Christmas has escalated to a total war, to where Christmas ought not be celebrated. I see so many things, but there was some leader of some country who warns that you ought not to celebrate Christmas because it promotes far-right extremism. So Christmas is now a part of the dogma of white nationalists. Christmas ought not be celebrated because it promotes right-wing extremism. And Christmas ought not be promoted because it infuriates these fucking towel heads. Jesus Christ is Lord. And I'll get to that more here in a little bit. Here's something else to think about, just shifting gears. And I don't bring this up because I necessarily agree with it top to bottom 100%. But I think something that's important, and something that you don't see on other shows, is that an idea should be examined for its intellectual validity rather than for the emotions that it might provoke. And I think that it's important to hear other ideas, even if you don't agree with them completely, because it is thought-provoking, and perhaps you should provoke your own thoughts from time to time. Here's what Apolitical says. Here's why you have to believe in the Holocaust. If you don't believe in the Holocaust, and for the record, I do believe that it happened. If you don't believe in the Holocaust, you can't argue that Mustache Man was the most evil human to ever exist. If the Mustache Man, and I don't mean Mario, if he isn't the most evil human ever, then there is no reason to look into fascism and National Socialism as plausible ideologies. For the record, I don't like fascism. I hate most forms of government. If anything, I would say I'm an anarchist, since I see what government does and I don't like it. I'm also not a fan of socialism. In socialism, the government owns all the means of production, so I'm not so much into socialism. I do like nationalism, though. I really like America, and it goes beyond mere patriotism. I do believe we are better than other countries, and I actively dislike other countries. Sorry, Canada. You were invited to join us, and you said no. If you look into fascism and National Socialism as plausible ideologies, if you suspend your disbelief about how inherently evil they are, at least suspend them, to at least critically analyze fascism and National Socialism, you might find that they have similar complaints to yours today. And we can't allow that. We can't have you looking back at fascism or National Socialism and have you find anything in common with how you feel. That's dangerous. That's erosive. If you find similarities between their complaints and yours, because believe it or not, they did have complaints. Were they legitimate? That's what we're asking. If you find similarities between their complaints and yours, you might find similarities in who is causing the problems. And there are problems, aren't there? When I was in school, they used to say the Nazis just found people to make into scapegoats. It is possible to earn your bad reputation. It is possible to be responsible for a problem. It is even possible to do that en masse. And this is why you have to believe in the Holocaust as the underpinning of morality for our entire society. Can you imagine how right and wrong were framed in the era before the 30s, before someone could just say, well, you're worse than the mustached man? You sound like the mustached man to me. How did you frame right and wrong before that massive event that defined the 20th century and defined good and evil up to the present day? Why is it that World War II was such a clear and present thing that we talk about every single day? Because it defines our morality. Why does it do that, though? Why doesn't Vietnam define our morality? Or the Gulf War? Or Grenada? These are important events. Why not the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917? It's just World War II that's like our constant frame of reference for what's right and wrong. Other events have happened. And perhaps we should take considering World War II, not disregarding it, but perhaps we ought to take a broader scope of history in general if we're going to use that as a lens for how we look at today. And perhaps we ought to give a fair hearing to a vanquished people. History is written by the victors, but I want to hear what the vanquished have to say and why they did what they did. They weren't given much of a shot. And you can have, you don't have to agree with the Germans or how far they took things or their response to the problem, but you can recognize that they did have a problem. They had an issue with something or someone. And you can say, we still have those problems today. We're not going to handle it like the mustached man. We're not going to have camps. We're not going to have trains. We're not going to tattoo people. And we're not going to put a star on them. But we can recognize that there is a problem. Is it possible that we could take such a nuanced stance? Could we be that critically thinking? No. Just to answer the question. Just remember 4 years ago, the Biden White House issued this demeaning and nasty Christmas message. By the way, I never like it when someone says Xmas. I think that's part of the war on Christmas. They take Christ literally out of the word. Never forget what they did to you. Here's Joe Biden by way of one of his many autopen proxies. We are intent on not letting Omicron. Remember Omicron? The new variant, the new threat, the new phantom, the new danger, that which enables government control over every aspect of your life, and you ought to be in fear, and you ought to be getting in line, and you ought to do what they say because somehow they know better than you. We are intent on not letting Omicron disrupt work and school for the vaccinated. You've done the right thing. Never mind that vaccine that you put in your body now has a black label on it from the FDA saying, warning, this might kill you. We will get through this. We will get through this together, good people. And to the bad people, for the unvaccinated, you're looking at a winter of severe illness and death for yourselves. You've chosen death. By being a bad person, you've chosen severe illness and death, and we have no sympathy for you. You've chosen death for yourselves, your family, and the hospitals you may soon overwhelm. Boy, nice Christmas message from Joe Biden. I heard a clip of him speaking the other day. He says there's nothing special about being American because not anyone here can define what an American is. Joe Biden, I know it's a little too late to the show, and you can't even hear me, and if you did, you would know what I'm saying, but you make me sick. You make me sick because you can't define what an American is despite being one. I'll tell you what an American is. An American, yes, is one person that comes from many different backgrounds and places. But an American is someone who fired the shot heard around the world and changed the history of Earth. A lot of people say, the United States Constitution ought to be changed. It's so old. It's the oldest Constitution there is. These people are completely oblivious to the fact that the United States Constitution was so earth-shattering that countries around the world stopped and looked and said, that's what we want for ourselves. And their constitutions and their forms of government were changed to resemble what Americans did. We pioneered freedom. We pioneered liberty, and the world stopped and took notice because we fired the shots at Lexington and Concord. We fired the shots at King George III. We stood up to the empire where the sun never sets, and we said, get the hell out of here. But that wasn't even the first thing that we did that was amazing. We left that country before that, and without any promises or assurances of what we would find when we got here, we sailed on a ship that had no toilet on it. It had terrible food and rats, 4 months to get here, to have no job, to have no social security, to have no safety net, no social net, no jobs. We established and staked a claim for ourselves ever westward, not being stopped by disease or want or hunger or mountains or the Apache. We kept going, and in 200 years, we took this country from a place where we were walking on roads paved with seashells to a place where we have flight, to where we put a man on the moon. And I don't care if you think it never happened. That's a liberal lie to make you believe that America is not great. Joe Biden says there's nothing special about being an American. We ended slavery, something that had been practiced throughout history. We engaged in it, and we said, no, we're not doing this in this country. And we didn't send those people back to Africa. The nice thing to do, it seemed to me, would have been to send it back where they came from. Thanks for your service. Here's a nice little stipend, a little reparations for you. We said, no, you helped build this country, and you get to be a part of it. We invented the 40-hour, 5-day work week. We pioneered the Industrial Revolution, interchangeable parts, scale, production, progress. Are we a perfect people? No. We fucking killed Hitler. We fucking went to the moon. And even though we've seen our setbacks in the last 20 years, there's nobody quite like an American. And throughout the history of the world, we will always be remembered long after this republic crumbles, and it is crumbling. We will be remembered as a great country, even if Joe Biden, as one of those people whose ancestors were fearless and bold and enterprising, even if he doesn't know what the fuck it means to be an American, I know what it means to be an American. There's your white nationalism for you on Christmas. But I'm trying to calm down. Do you see how I get wound up and I can't calm down? So let's go to read a little Corinthians before we get to Luke. Children are submit to their parents. Yeah, we all agree with that. That's a good idea. 5th commandment, you're supposed to honor your parents. I'm not perfect at that. Children are supposed to submit to your parents. Here's the one that's really significant for the first century church. Husbands are to sacrificially love their wives and their family. You know, women were seen as property 2,000 years ago. Commodity to be traded. Certainly, Muhammad didn't care that Aisha was 9 years old, because to him it was just a commodity, just a resource to use up. The first century, we're commanding husbands to actually love your wives, not just treat them as property. A big admonishment towards cultural norms at that time. Big one. Wives, submit to your husbands. That at the time was very, very normal. That was not a controversial thing to say in the first century. Wives, submit to your husbands. Normal. It's no more abnormal than children submitting to their parents. Wives, submit to their husbands. The big admonishment in Corinthians in the first century is telling husbands to sacrificially love their wives and their family. But through the modern context, you tell a wife to submit to her husbands, you better wash your mouth out. Better not ask for a woman to submit to a man. That's wrong. I frequently get in arguments with Christians who seem to say, well, I believe in some parts of the Bible and some parts I don't. Well, they're all the inspired word of God. And I guess if you don't believe it, or if you think some parts of it don't correspond to your morality, congratulations on your promotion to God, because you're more moral than God. So congratulations on your promotion. And let's see how it works out for you when you're actually held to account as the small being you are before eternal judgment on whether or not what you thought was right or wrong versus God, who defined the universe and morality that's in it. Good luck. And I'm not saying that you ought to boss your wife around and be a total jerk. In fact, Corinthians told me that I had to love you as a wife and be nice to you. So what's the problem with submission? Well, don't submit. Take it up to God. That's the great thing about being right, is that you don't have to worry about it in the end. All right. We calm now? We calm? Fuck. Last time Santa's elves tried to unionize, they sent the Grinch into the factory like a Pinkerton agent. Shot them all one by one with a bolt gun from No Country for Old Men. You realize that Christmas, that bringing gifts to all the good little boys and girls around the world in 24 hours cannot be done on that scale with anything less than free elf labor. And if they try to unionize, forget it. Christmas will come every 18 months. Christmas will come every other year. So good on the Grinch for going around and bolt gunning all those people. I found out that bolt gun doesn't exist, that you can't actually have a pneumatic tool drive a piston with enough force held in your hand to puncture the skull of a creature. You would just bounce off of it, severely pissing off the cow, or the elf in this case. Still a great movie. Still love it. Still a great book if you've never read it. Are you storing your cheese in the fridge? Experts say you should be leaving it on the counter. Here's the expert. Oh, you little guy, you want that cheese, don't you? Seems like something Data would tell me to do, my dog. You know, you really ought to just leave that where I could get at it. Are you going to be gone all day? I'm going to get hungry later. If you want to leave some chocolate out for me. I do love chocolate. I see you eating chocolate, John, and I know how much you love it. Why can I not have chocolate? The fact that the pre-Unabomber Ted Kaczynski was a once-in-a-generation polymath genius means that citing his research can be a tad awkward unless you just roll with it, which has resulted in the greatest footnote ever written here. Here's what they're writing in their research. 2 years later, T.J. Kaczynski, which they refer to him as TJ, answers Sutcliffe's question in the negative. His elegant proof showed that there exists a 3-digit solution to n, then deleting the middle digit gives a 2-digit solution to n. Together with Sutcliffe's work, this proves that there exists a 2-digit solution for n, if only there exists a 3-digit solution for n. Good job, Ted. You are a genius. And here for Kaczynski, it says as his footnote, better known for other work. There's something about big brain mathematicians. They actually, I think they get to see beyond the concept of reality because they get to see that the mathematics for how the universe works doesn't correspond to how the universe actually works. That there's a phenomenon in play that surpass their ability to comprehend. And I think it makes them a little insane. And once they see it, they can't unsee it. They can't come back from that. They glimpse something beyond the observable reality. They see something outside of Plato's cave. And after that, they can never sit tight and just pretend that it's all fine. I think Ted Kaczynski was maybe one of those. I already played that one. And that one. Sometimes you just got to stay in the house because outside costs like $300 a day. You're telling me about it. I leave and I go put gas in. I'm not even out of town yet. It's $61 to fill up my truck. And then by the time I've eaten, I've left a decent tip. That's another $60. And I've done 2 things. Well on our way to $300 a day. You actually won't get an upset stomach from Taco Bell if you're pure of heart and have good intentions. Or if you have a strong American Constitution. If you are weak, if you're somebody whose bloodline should discontinue, and Taco Bell's taking you down. I think that's your proof right there. If you're someone who has to go to urgent care after Taco Bell. You were never meant. You were never meant for this world. You're too fragile, too beautiful for this world if Taco Bell brings you down. Let's keep moving. Let's end the show on time today. This one made me mad because I have not only watched Home Alone probably 50 times, but I have written critical essays on Home Alone, and there's a tremendous amount of visual symbols in Home Alone. I encourage you to, the character of Old Man Marley, who is salting the streets, watch him throughout the movie. He has his own arc in the background, but there's deep symbolism with him, how he's a mirror and a foil for Kevin, how he's on the eventual path that Kevin is on when Kevin says, when I grow up and get married, I'm living alone. He would become Old Man Marley. But I want you to look at his right hand throughout the film. Every single instance that you see him, I want you to look at his right hand. So I say all this because I am a deep, deep thinker and observer and researcher of the film Home Alone, which, by the way, is the last great Christmas classic ever made. And I say this also to let you know that I do not like any of the Chevy Chase movies. But just remember, Kevin McAllister could have phoned the police at any time. He was a child who had been accidentally been left home alone. One call and he could have been safe. It's not true. As they're loading up into the vans on their way to Chicago O'Hare, one of the electricians who has recently restored power to the house walks up to Kate and says, "We've turned your power back on, but the phone lines are a mess. It's going to take Ma Bell a week to untangle them." She doesn't care because she's not going to be using the phone. She's going to Paris. So this person who does not fucking ever watch Home Alone has a criticism for Home Alone and wants to say that Kevin was the aggressor because he didn't call the police. When you are a child, you're somewhat afraid of the police. I remember my first encounter with the police, like formally. It was terrifying because they dispatched police officer Stone Cold Steve Austin to come talk to me. When you're 8 years old, the police can kind of scare you. Sure enough, they're knocking on the door. You're hiding under the bed. I love that scene too, because earlier when Kevin realizes he's home alone and he can do whatever the hell he wants, he jumps on his parents' bed and eats popcorn. And when he hides under the bed when the police officer's knocking under the door, which, by the way, is completely what I would have done at his age, there's popcorn all over the floor. And then later, as Kevin gets up to his gumption and realizes he's the man of his house, it's his house and he has to defend it, all the popcorn on the floor is gone. So he's been hiding under the bed eating popcorn that entire time. Just watch the movie. It's full of little references like that. It's a great movie. This person doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. It was never about safety. It was about hunting those men. He wanted them to die. It was fun for him. He enjoyed it. I can tell you why that is not true and why later those cases a little suspect. Because when the first time he hears that the wet bandits are going to be coming to his house, he has just cut down the tree and he can hear them outside saying, "We'll come back around 9:00. Kids are scared of the dark." "Well, you're scared of the dark too, Marv." "Nuh-uh, just that one time." Kevin knows they're coming around 9:00. And what does he do? He doesn't set about traps for them immediately to hunt them. He fills up the house with music, with light, with a Michael Jordan cutout that's attached to a train, and he's got all the ropes on all the mannequins to make the house look full. He does everything he can to dissuade these guys from coming back. When they come back at 9:00, he creates an illusion to prevent them from ever coming inside the house. So Kevin is not evil. Kevin is not a monster. Let's talk about where Kevin takes on a little bit more moral responsibility. That's in Home Alone 2. Because when he gets to New York, he looks out the window of the airport and he can see tall skyscrapers and he knows he's not in Orlando. He asks the ticket agent, "What city is that out there?" And she says, "That's New York City." And this is his moment. This is the moment of choosing for Kevin, where he says, "Oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to be in New York. My family has gone to Florida. Can you help me get on a plane to Florida?" And she'd be like, "You're an unaccompanied minor who just flew on this airline and you've wound up in the wrong place? Absolutely. I will put you on an airplane right now, free of charge, to get you where you're supposed to be." Kevin does not choose this. He goes and he enjoys the city. He's a fan of a game show where they talk about the Plaza Hotel and all these other amenities in New York, and he takes pictures atop the World Trade Center and meets Donald Trump and does all these wonderful things. The moment of his choosing, moment of his moral gravity towards the wet bandits who he randomly encounters while walking around New York, which has to be something just statistically astronomical. He overhears the wet bandits who he wants to stay away from. He ran away from them on his first encounter. It's not about hunting. He ran away from them, but he heard that they were planning to knock over Duncan's toy store. And Kevin had already had an encounter at the toy store with Mr. Duncan, who said that all the profit that they were going to take in on Christmas Eve was going to help little kids in the hospital. In fact, Kevin made a pilgrimage to the hospital and saw a little boy just like himself in the window of the hospital waving. And Kevin says, "I cannot allow this morally. It's not about hunting these men. It's about defending the interests of these little kids in the hospital." So he says, especially since he has a guilty conscience about some of the bad things that he has done, and driven by, that Pierce Morgan lady in Central Park when she says that good deeds count for extra tonight, he says, "I'm going to defend this place." And he when he throws the rock through the glass pane window of Duncan's toy store, even that, there's contrition in that, because later they find a note attached to it saying, "Sorry, I hope you have good insurance. This was the only way I could stop them from robbing your store." So Kevin is driven morally throughout both stories to protect his own house and to protect the interest of those children. In fact, the moral weight in Home Alone 2 takes on an even more grandiose scale. He knew that the burglars were going to chase him. At his Uncle Rob's house, he set up some traps for them. Yes, that was fun. Yes, he enjoyed it. There's nothing wrong with enjoying your work. But to say that Kevin was hunting those men, that's by somebody that doesn't think about movies 24 hours a day like I do. What y'all know about peanuts in your Pepsi, though? Not a damn thing, and let's keep it that way. Anybody here like Pepsi? Gross, right? For those of you who have long time watched the show, you know that I like Pepsi, or I like Coke with my peanuts. Everyone's just saying hello. Stop saying hello. Don't do that. Everyone just saying hello. Everyone just saying things. Tyler, I get it. You're all doing Christmas things. I'm probably competing with Perry Como or something in the background. So I'll end the show. Just wanted to spend Christmas Eve with my peeps. What can I say? Fuck small talk. How old were you when it all went wrong? I think it's a great question to ask a common person. How old were you when it all went wrong? For me, it was around 4 or 5. My younger sister had been born. The Gulf War happened and the family fell apart. Go laugh in the places you cried. Change the narrative. By the way, I like the tombstone. Just says grandma. Your identity is completely defined by your relationship to other people once you're a grandma. And this lady just laughing at grandma's grave. this meme. Half of it's funny just because of the way that was made. You could be positive and break a bottle over somebody's head, though. Multiplicity of identity. This sounds like Tyler. You could be positive and break somebody's bottle over somebody's head. A cute thing I tell my kids when I see a dead deer on the side of the road is, oh no, looks like Santa lost his temper again. Just letting them know there's an element of chaos and danger, even in the most wholesome of things. You better watch out. You better not cry. Santa Claus is coming to town. Don't show me a picture of myself. Please, never show me what I look like. First off, it's incorrect. Secondly, why do I look like that? Do I look like this? What is with my hair? I haven't worn a hat the past couple episodes. It helps that I'm better looking now than I was in my youth, but my dad is describing in great detail how he would kill the Grinch while my mom is cooking breakfast for 16 people. I would gun him down. He's inside my house in the middle of the night. Castle doctrine. Taking the Grinch out. It's not even manslaughter if what you're killing is a Grinch. Stop being pregnant around my cigarettes. Guys, cigarette smokers are human beings too, and they also have rights, and they have the right to choose to smoke. Every day I wake up and begin this 16-hour process of getting ready for bed. That's me anymore. I can hardly feel the days passing. I can't even tell you what happened to the last 6 months of my life. I've just been so busy and so locked into a routine. Wake up, do stuff, go to work, do work, drive home, go to bed, wash, rinse, and repeat. That's all it is. A phrase I'm very fond of is that when someone asks me how my day was, I'll say, oh, it's just another one of 10,000 that I'll never remember. Will you remember today? Today's Christmas Eve, 2025. It is a date, at least at face value, that you ought to remember. But do you remember Christmas Eve last year? How about 2 years ago? How about 5 years ago? Do you remember Christmas Eve 7 years ago? If your Facebook memories are turned on, you do, maybe. Other than that, what do you have? Just another 10,000 days you don't remember. What's up? Well, hopefully my time. I wish I had a quick, pithy, little depressing response for every little greeting. What's up? Hopefully my time. I hate it when people ask about my family, because then I have to decide whether to lie, to drop the most diabolical lore. You want to hear about my family? You want to hear about my mom and dad? I've done it a little bit on the show where I've talked about my mom and my dad, and it's been pretty diabolical. I have not lied about them. I remember once I was in high school, and I had to write stupid essay, fun family memories. And I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? I don't have any fun family memories. But I'm like, I can't reveal to the teacher in this class what goes on at home. Can't tell them about the abuse, the neglect, the terrible conditions that I live in, the crimes. We're not going to discuss that. So I came up with some story. And I eventually, for some reason, I had to read it out loud in the class about going to the pool and hanging out with my sister all summer long. And then someone at some point approached me who was in that class and talked to me about it. I'm just like, do you think that was the truth? That was the truth. If anyone's looking for a last minute Christmas gift, this is also part of the reason why I wanted to do the show today, because I had a whole bunch of Christmas memes that were set to expire tomorrow. If anyone's looking for a last minute Christmas gift for me, I would love to be hunted for sport. It's actually part of the lore that I tell about my parents when I do lie. I tell them the most dangerous game. My dad owned an island off the coast of Maine, and he put the lighthouse in the wrong location so that ships would be lulled into a false sense of navigational safety and they would crash. And when the survivors would wash ashore, he would hunt them for sport. Of course, now there's like a Jack Carr book that does the same thing and even makes overt references to the most dangerous game. Somewhere over in the Kamchatka Peninsula, there are these elites that hunt people for fun. And, Jack Carr's character in those books, which are decent books, he undoes that. I like the first book because he kills Hillary Clinton in that book. Pretty thinly veiled. Kills both of the Clintons. I had to listen to that one again. Dennis said I can eat candy and stuff because he no longer cares about me or my teeth. Can you imagine? He just sits down in the chair next to you and I'm just like, I promise I've been flossing. And he just looks at you and just like, I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. I'm billing your insurance. What are you going to do about it? It's all just forms anyway. You want me to actually look in there? I know you don't. You want me to just sign off saying you went to the dentist and I can send you home? I would love a maniacally cynical and depressed dentist. I think that would be good for a show. Just someone who like absolutely nihilistic, saw no point at all. Like it's all the world's decay. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Brushing, flossing, they all do nothing. We're all going to hell. Best case scenario, a cold, intactile, dark, all consuming. All right. So can I get a cleaning? Or if you're reading this, tense your jaw, tense your shoulders, tighten your entire body. Don't drink water for 48 hours. You got this. Guys, remember, bad coping mechanisms are a kind of coping mechanism. Whatever you got to do to get through it, no matter how bad, at least you're getting through it, right? Go ahead, have an extra sip. There's nothing quite like wrapping presents to remind you that you suck and you can't do anything right and you will never amount to anything. Yeah. You guys ever like cut a piece of wrapping paper and it's just like, a fraction of an inch, a millimeter to those Canadians in the audience, just barely doesn't cover it. So you're like, well, I could take another strip and put it underneath. It's not perfect. Or there's a little extra there and you're like, oh, I got to trim it, and there's extra trim. And someone told you at some point that you're supposed to be able to wrap a gift with just 2 pieces of tape, but fuck, it takes you 9. Get your piece of shit. All my problems boil down to me being bad at being alive. I'm bad at this. I often try to say like, sorry, this is my first time being alive. I'm new at this, but the truth is I'm 41. I've had so many unremarkable 10,000 days that nobody gives me a pass in that anymore. I don't think I'm meant to be in a relationship. I think I'm meant to be at the hospital or like maybe the movies. That's where I'm supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be with anyone. I'm supposed to be getting treatment. Last one for the day. I developed a new hobby called 2 a.m. Basically, you get so sad. I am overcome with depression every single night before I go to sleep. And then I have nightmares to wake up to. But I'm going to transition to something more positive and something unusual for this show, something I think unusual anywhere. It's Christmas Eve. And we're mad about the Israeli state, and we're mad about our government, and we're mad about our judges, and we're mad at each other, and we're mad, and we're mad, and we're angry, and we're so angry. There's no peace on earth. There's no goodwill towards men, and it's because of us. It's because of me, it's because of my neighbors, and because all of us refuse to love each other the way that we were commanded to do. All of us refuse to forgive, even though it's the one thing that we all need so much. We all need forgiveness, but we want to be forgiven. We want to be given a pass, and yet we refuse to give that to anyone else. Well, luckily for us, our salvation is not dependent on our ability to forgive each other, because if it did, we're all screwed. We have forgiveness that comes from a higher place. And we have a gift of life that comes from a higher place than Santa Claus or from Kohl's or from Amazon. When I was a child, I went to a very serious Mennonite school. And if you don't know Mennonites, they're pretty badass. They're pretty nice people, at least the ones in my experience. I was very blessed. I think the only reason I'm remotely normal and functional is probably because I spent my earliest childhood years from ages 3 all the way up to 10 being surrounded by good people who had a solid doctrine and a Christ-centered view. Even if I don't completely agree with Mennonites on everything, like, I get a little rowdy and I vote sometimes, you know? I think that sometimes violence is called for. A Mennonite would never do that. I'm really more of a general Protestant Anabaptist type. But let's not get into denominational differences. The reason I bring this up is because we had the best Christmas program ever. And I don't like Christmas programs. I skipped church 2 weeks ago because I don't like the Christmas program that we do at my church. I think it's about making parents feel good and forcing children to do something they don't want to do, which I'm in favor of that, but I shouldn't have to watch it. I think it's faint praise for God when you just come up with a child's Christmas program, because you think you're supposed to have one. We did it right, though, because ours was completely centered around the Bible and the telling of the story from Luke 2. We would all come into the sanctuary darkened. I like a very somber Christmas. I generally don't like the jolly Christmas songs, although there's a few exceptions. We would come in proceeding in a line in the dark, each of us carrying a candle, a real candle, a flame candle. Children, we would sing, "Oh, Come, Let Us Adore," and we sang all 4 verses of this as we all came in and filled up the front of the church. And along the walls on either side, the room was only lit by candles. And the only thing you could hear was children singing, and I believe someone was playing the piano. You're accompanied by piano. And we had a scene of a nativity. And we had a scene of the events that I'm about to describe. And it was a good Christmas program because all it was the Bible. It wasn't the story of some character discovering what Christmas is all about. We weren't trying to live it through some other framework. We just told the story. And we did it in a really cool way. We did it in the King James Version, which is a form of the Bible which is not easy to understand in modern English. However, I think it's more beautiful. Sue me. I like the King James. I think if you want to understand the Bible and what it means for your life and have it be a transformative experience, you should read it in whatever translation makes the most sense to you, just making sure that it is a Bible you're reading. But this is some beautiful language here, and I haven't read all the way through Luke 2, and I haven't spoken the words out loud since 1995. Since the last time the Cowboys went to the Super Bowl is the last time I did this. But I think it's important, not only because it's the truth of the world and the truth of what Christmas is and what Linus alludes to in Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown, but there's people who are gathered all over the world right now trying to put a stop to Christmas. They are gathered in the squares in Germany. They are canceling Christmas celebrations in Paris, around the world, because it is too dangerous and it is too right-wing extremist to celebrate Christmas. And to that I say, listen. And if I wanted to say that in King James, I would say, hark. Listen up. And if you don't like this, just turn it off. Get lost, because if you don't want to hear it, then I don't want you here. Because this is the truth, and this is what Christmas is all about. Luke 2, in the original King James Version, as though, it wasn't originally in a different language. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, unto the city of David, which was called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in the manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them. And they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this will be a sign unto you. You shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away from them into heaven, that the shepherds said to one another, Let us go, even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which has come to pass, which the Lord has made known to us. And they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen it, and they had made known abroad the saying which was told them concerning the child, and all they heard, all wondered at those things which were told to them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, and was told unto them. And when 8 days were accomplished for the circumcising of the child, his name was called Jesus, which was so named by the angel before he was even conceived in the womb. So, there's the truth of it. Mary and Joseph were not refugees. They were going home where they were supposed to be so that they could be documented, accounted for, to pay taxes, unlike what the chief of police of St. Paul says. And there's so much subtext here that's impossible to pick up if you're not someone who doesn't know anything about the old world, first century. But you need to know that shepherds were somebody that were so lowly. They lived with the animals all the time. They smelled like animals. They lived like animals. They were the dregs of society. Common equivalent today would be a crackhead. They were the lowest people, and they were the ones who received this news about the salvation of the earth. Shepherds were considered so lowly by society. They weren't even allowed to testify in court. They didn't even have that status to what they could go to court, and even if they were witness to something, they could not testify. But here, they were witness to the greatest thing. Angels revealing themselves and saying, you've been given the greatest gift. It's going to bring about world peace, goodwill toward men. And the shepherds didn't care that no one would believe them. Shepherds didn't care. And they went out with this great news and told everyone anyway. And that's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown. And I don't care for all these people who deny Christ, the people who espouse the beliefs of the Quran and the Talmud. That's the truth. And it's the reason why you should have a Merry Christmas, even if it's another of 10,000 days that you won't remember later. There's meaning to this day. And there's more reason now than ever, if not for your own salvation, if that were not enough, but the fact that there's people who are trying to stop it from happening. Live a life for Christ. Do it for him. Do it for yourself because it's the right thing to do. And if these things are somehow not enough, do it out of spite because somebody wants you to stop. All right. You guys have a Merry Christmas. Thanks for listening to that. I'm sorry if I got you all riled up and angry, but I have those things. You look at this world, and it's an impossibly fallen world, completely consumed by evil. You have one foot in it because you live here, but try to remember that if you have a heart for Jesus, you have a heart for somewhere else. And try to live for that day when it's all going to be made right. Thank you, guys. Merry Christmas.